Look at Bill running the whole studio there by himself.
I'm nervous, man. The last two, we had some great guests and it got screwed up, you know.
There's a lot going on over there.
Need to hire you a young, cute blonde to do it for you. That way you can just
true.
talk in the mic.
I think we are live, fellas.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Police Off the Cuff After Hours. My name is Mark DeMeo. I'm your host, my co-host, and my partner in all things law enforcement, the very handsome Bill Cannon. What's up, Bill?
So happy to be here. So happy. It seems that so far we don't have any technical problems like we had the last couple of weeks. You're right. We need an engineer, you know.
But we're doing it. We're doing it. And we got a great guest tonight. He's coming to us from Missouri. He's a coroner. He has a podcast called Coroner Talk.
Yep.
He also are you the director of Death Investigation Training Academy?
Yep. I sure am. Well? Sure enough.
And he's here to us, coming to us from Missouri.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invite. I'm going to enjoy this.
Darren Dake. I didn't say your name.
Nope.
Oh,
no Dake, R.
Dake.
What?
No
Darren
R.
Dake.
Dake?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the famous Cornell wrestler that was a 4-time NCAA champion. You related to him?
Shit.
No.
Kyle Dake? No, I didn't think so.
No. Not that I know of.
Oh, it's good to have you. Is that what kind of background is that you picked out there?
That is my real background.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
yes.
so cool. It looks almost like like a green screen background. And that
is truly the wall of my office.
And that's a wolf, right?
Coyote.
A coyote. All right. See, I'm a city guy.
Yeah, in New York City, he was going to say that's a dog, right?
Yeah.
That's a Central Park West dog, isn't it?
He took one too many chickens, and now he's going to stand there for years.
That's a rich lady's dog from Central Park West.
What is that? Is it German Shepherd?
Yeah.
It's a miniature German Shepherd.
Thought it was a pit bull. So that's a real thing. You caught that? You go hunting? Is that you're into hunting?
Yeah. I hunt, fish. Yep, all that. And then on that side over there, that's the deer I killed 2 years ago. And so we had a European mount, but I just put it in a setting rather than hanging on the wall.
What's the area like where you live?
I'm about 80 miles out of St. Louis. So, St. Louis is all real populated and we've got some suburbs. But then as you get out to where I'm at, we've got a lot of rural land. But my family owns a farm about 2 more hours from here, about 1,200 acres. And so we hunt there a lot. So.
Oh, that's cool, man.
Yep.
And you grew up with that?
Grew up farming, milking cows. My uncle and brother-in-law have dairy farms. I just grew up a farm kid.
So the idea of seeing dead stuff, you've been seeing that since you were a kid. Is that
started out with cats.
Hope you didn't start killing small animals because that's
just
one of
cats.
the indicators of a serial killer.
Yeah. I didn't catch them on fire. I just killed them. There wasn't a cat safe in our farm.
Oh, good. Darren, let me ask you something now. In New York City, a medical legal investigator must be a physician's assistant. That's the criteria educationally to become a medical legal investigator. Is that true in Missouri also?
No, it's not at all. But I also don't understand. You said to be an MDI that works for the New York City Medical Examiner's Office.
Yeah, Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Yes.
And all their investigators are also PAs, because we've had students go through our academy and I didn't know they were PAs.
Yeah, they're physician's assistants. I didn't realize that in New York City. Yeah, so they that's a hell of a lot of education for a job that doesn't pay all that much.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't know the students that took our program was a physician assistant. That's crazy, huh?
Well, what level of education do you have? Because we might kick you off the show if you don't have.
So, yeah. So, I quit high school in 10th grade. They gave me the job. I'm good to go.
Just like hanging out around dead bodies a lot.
Yeah, I was the only one to take it. No, I mean, I've got college in criminal justice, and I've spent my entire life as a police detective working sex and death. When I made lieutenant, I was able to give all the property crimes off to everybody else. I enjoyed sex and death, not always in that order. And then I just continued to work with the coroner's office. And then when I retired law enforcement, I'm teaching full time. And of course, I'm the elected coroner in our county. So I've got a lot of training in death investigation, criminal investigation. So, but I'm not a physician's assistant by no means, but
Right.
yeah.
Well, there's a big difference between smaller towns that have the
Right.
coroner system and ones that have the office of the chief medical examiner.
Yeah, and even the office of medical examiners are different. New York. First off, let's just say this: New York has 31 different genders, so they're already confused. Okay, so in other parts of the country, like Missouri, there's medical examiners in Missouri as well, and their investigators don't have to be physician assistant. They just have to have certain criteria, certain training. Usually, they want them to be ABMDI certified within a couple of years, things like that. But I don't know of any that require physician assistant, except you're saying New York. But
yeah, that's what I was told by the MLI
AD.
that responded.
So generally, most of them will require a college degree of some kind, and it can be criminal justice, or it can be anatomy, physiology, anthropology, all kinds of stuff, or like 5 years experience and things like that. So a lot of the places, even the ME offices, don't always require college hardcore. They say we want it, but we'll also accept these things which equal to it. So that's most of the country.
So you get a hell of a lot of on-the-job training. That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they want you to come with some education, and then from there, of course, you're going to pick it all out of it up when you start working.
We had an ME on the show, Barbara Butcher. She worked with us, great lady, and she talked about in her childhood how for some reason she was fascinated with finding out, cutting animals open and finding out what's going on inside. And she had her uncle order her little animals in formaldehyde so she can dissect them. Yeah. And I guess your introduction was hunting then, right? Did you go hunting with your dad and see?
Oh yeah, right. And I grew up hunting since I was 6 years old. But I don't know that the hunting part. I knew that I always wanted to be a police officer. So as I got older, I joined the Army to be a military policeman. From there, I was a civilian policeman. And throughout the first few years of being a patrol officer, I realized I was good at investigation. So that kind of took me into solving a lot of cases. I was one of the youngest detectives, made detective, and then sergeant, moved up from there. And because of that, as I started investigating crimes, I started realizing, well, wait a minute, I like the sexual assaults and the rapes, the child molestations and death cases. I'm better at that. I mean, I can work those. And a lot of the guys are like, man, I don't want to be around dead bodies. Well, I wanted the puzzle. And I wanted to figure out what happened. I wanted to get answers to the family. So I think it was more of, once I started in law enforcement, I found the niche that I enjoyed and then dedicated my life that direction. Some guys like, traffic cops, some like, property crimes, some like vice. I just always like sex and death.
Now, let me ask you something. Is your homicide unit and your sex crime unit, are they integrated? Are they together?
Yes, they're the same.
See, in New York City, they're very much separate. And,
right. And but that's a huge department. But right. And a lot of the bigger cities are. I mean, we got some cities around here where when you have multiple detectives that are, but majority of the country, there's like 21,500 police agencies, I guess. Majority of them have less than 10 officers.
Right.
In America. So when you have a department that has, 30, 40, 50 people, officers, you're only have 2 or 3 detectives. They're going to have to work everything.
Yes. Yeah. But there are definitely 2 distinct different types of investigation.
Absolutely, they are.
Different skills. And so
yes,
I would think I worked in a unit called Manhattan North Homicide Squad, and on the same floor was Manhattan Special Victims.
Yeah.
And I always, and I've said this before, I've always admired the sex crime detectives because they had a very specific skill set, but they were excellent investigators,
Right.
They had a lot of patience, because they had to talk to children a lot.
Yeah.
And they had to talk to people that lied to them a lot, which, well, so does a homicide investigator, but special victims seem to have that at a much higher level than any other crime.
Right. Well, homicide, if I commit a homicide, I'm scared about going to jail. That's the main thing. If I've committed a sex crime, not only am I afraid about going to jail, there's also a lot of taboo around it. So I don't want to be known as a child molester. Okay, you caught me. You know, I killed a guy that did me wrong on a dope deal or whatever it was. You know, but they're going to be more reluctant when you're talking to them on the child sex side. You know, or even rape of adult woman. I mean, there's taboo to that more so than just, you know, I murdered somebody for whatever reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you a question. Well, this is probably something that everybody wants to know. Why does the coroner's report take so long?
Well, usually, yeah, and I'll tell you why. A lot of times it's because there's a couple of reasons. One, when you're dealing with medical examiners, they are way behind. There is not enough of them in the country, so they're cutting bodies as fast as they can all day long. Well, then they have to take some time to sit down. Actually, I mean, they've recorded it, but they have to write the report and do their report. But they're so busy cutting bodies, they don't always have time to do that. Plus, they're waiting on toxicology. They're waiting on histology. Sometimes they have to send the brain off to have some analysts. Or toxicology labs are behind. I mean, you know, it only takes, you know, so long to do toxicology, but you might be 60 days away from your number coming up. So it takes a long time sometimes to get that stuff done just because there's so many going through the system. And now with the opioid crisis, it's quadrupled or more.
You know, one of the things I think that our listeners, and it's always confusing to anyone that follows even these homicide shows, and that's the manner of death and the cause of death. Would you explain that to our listeners? Absolutely.
So the cause of death is what started a chain of morbid events that led to your death. So if I get shot in the head, then then the cause of death would be gunshot wound to the head or gunshot wound to the central nervous system, however you want to say it. But then there's a manner of death. Well, in that, there's 5 manners. There's natural, accident, suicide, undetermined, and
homicide.
Homicide. Yeah, I missed that one. So the thing is, it's not going to be natural, right? We're going to try to make it not be undetermined. So now we left with accident, suicide, or homicide. So just because there's a gun, it could be any of those 3. Maybe I killed myself. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe someone shot me. So there's a lot that goes into manner of death. Just like if someone, I ran over my girlfriend with a truck. It was okay the first time it was an accident, but when I backed up, that probably wasn't an accident. But what caused the death was probably like, an aorta separation or dissection or something. But the manner would most likely be homicide if I backed up. Yeah.
And another thing that people don't really realize is that the definition of homicide is just death caused by another. Yeah. It doesn't imply criminality. No. So when the press puts out that a cop shot and killed a guy that charged at him with a knife and it's been ruled a homicide, the public automatically thinks that it's criminal.
Uh-huh. And that's what the media wants them to think.
Yes, of course they do. But just, again, the definition of homicide is death caused by another.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be criminal, right?
Right. Exactly. No. And a lot of times, it is justified, or the person, police, 99.9% of all police shootings are justified. So yeah, it's homicide, but it's still justified homicide. Well, if someone breaks into your house and they're attacking you and you kill them, that's homicide. But that's going to be fine. That's justified because you're in fear for your life.
Right.
Okay, I'll give you a scenario. You're the coroner, and you get the George Floyd case.
Oh boy, we're going to get kicked off YouTube.
There's going to be a lot of pressure on you right now. It's a 2-part question. There's going to be a lot of pressure on you to come up with the answers that, the the pressure that's going on with this case. Right. And the flip side is being hired to dispute, because you're an expert. Now you're being hired to dispute the coroner's report. Tell us both, both of those sides. And can you guys get along?
Well, if everybody's doing their job correctly, we can get along. I mean, part of the problem is people who are hired to dispute an autopsy case, a lot of times is they're pay to play, and no one person intended here, but sometimes they're pay to play. So if I'm a consultant and I'm hired by other agencies, but I've told them I'll give you my opinion. I'm not pro or against prosecution. So can we get along? Yes, except that a lot of times if we make a ruling of something, if the defense hires somebody to look at the report again and they come up with the same conclusion that I did, the defense won't use them. But if they come up with something separate, then obviously we're going to be at odds because they're going to call me a buffoon and an idiot because they don't agree with my findings. But generally that's because they're interpreting it the way they want to interpret it for the scenario. So, and in my case, I don't care. And I've addressed similar situations, not national level, but I don't care the outcome. I honestly am going to tell the truth as to how we see it and the findings that we find. Give me new evidence, I'll change my ruling. But I'm not going to slant it one way, pro, con, this is what it is. But that's the only way you can be in our industry, or we should be in our industry.
Right.
So that's why if I was a defense attorney, I'd probably hire 3 coroners, hoping to get the answer that I want out of at least one of them.
And they do.
And the other 2 I won't use. Right.
And that's what they do. Yes. Well, I've got attorneys contacting me and they send me all the information and I tell them, I will give you my opinion. It may not be what you want, but you can either use me, not use me, and then a couple of them have said, look, I want the truth. I can go back to my client and say, look, bud, you're going to have to plead, or we know we have a case. I just want you to tell me the truth. And those are the attorneys I like to work with, because then I can just give them my opinion and why I base it on that opinion. And then they can use that as they want to. And 99% of the time, they discuss it with their client and said, look, this is, we've hired an independent. You're screwed, dude. Let's take a plea. And now, that's really what they want sometimes.
When you say use you, you're talking about actually testifying in court, right?
Yeah. And I don't do that in Missouri. But,
you're going to get paid for your opinion.
Yes.
But now you're going to get extended paid because now we're going to use you in court, and that could drag on. So that's probably the motive for wanting to be used.
Right. Yeah, I guess. I mean, so I can't do that in Missouri, but I've done some cases out of California and some out of Texas. I've never been called out there. I have a fee for giving my opinion, and then if they want to bring me out there, of course, it's going to cost them a lot more. But my opinion has been enough. They've either pled the case, or they just decided not to use me or whatever. And that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I would just as soon give you my opinion and stay right here in Missouri. I have no interest in going to California and testifying regardless of the money. But if you want my opinion, I'll give you the honest opinion and you do with that as you please.
Well, some things like DNA are such an exact science that it's sort of hard to argue it, because, it might be 1 trillion to 1 that it's this guy,
Yeah.
But I think
they argue a collection.
Yeah, or the sample was tainted or whatever they want to say with that, or else they just bore the shit out of the jury for 3 weeks to the point where their brains don't work anymore.
That's right.
They did on the OJ case, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, but that case also had some problems because it was proven that there was blood planted. Well, you prove one thing that was done wrong, it don't matter what you do right, it's done. Nobody's going to believe it at that point.
Where did they plant the blood?
Well, some of the blood drops that was found, some of OJ's blood that was found on the scene already had sodium fluoride in it, and it was the anticoagulant preservative from when they took his blood for sample. Well, that don't naturally come out of your body. So some of the drops they found had that. Well, that got brought up. So that doesn't mean that everything was bad. Bring up one bad thing they found, and that's why Furman got in trouble. But
yeah. Well, the other thing is, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is the term Csi Effect.
Oh, my Lord, yes.
Yeah, and that's the effect where everyone in the public is an expert from watching all of these police shows, Forensic Files, there's millions of them, Law and Order. Yeah. Everyone's an expert. So they think in absolutes. So if there's no fingerprints on the scene, this guy must not have done it. There's no DNA on the scene, this guy must not have done it. And I've seen scenes that had no DNA, had no fingerprints, but the guy absolutely did do it,
Absolutely. And they all want it done in 45 minutes, and they don't know why it takes us 6 weeks, 8 weeks, a month, 2 months, 6 months to solve it. They think 45 minutes and we're done.
Right, exactly.
When I tell them it could take me up to 6 months to get all the DNA analysis done, they're just dumbfounded. The procedure don't take that long. It just takes that long for my case to come up in the number. My turn.
When you're being asked for your opinion in a case, you're just going based off of the paperwork that was supplied by the original coroner, right?
Yeah, or the police reports. A lot of times when an attorney wants my opinion, they send me the original coroner report, medical records, photographs, police reports. They send me everything of discovery that they've received, and they send that to me. And then they'll ask me the question. I want to know these questions, 3, 4, 5 questions. So then I'll answer those questions, yes or no, based upon that. And in my opinion, I say, based upon the information you provided, the question you ask, here's my answer. I mean, I can't, if you left something out, you left something out, but based upon what you gave me, this is my opinion.
Does it make a difference if you're actually the person working on the body? Does it make much of a difference?
Sometimes. Yeah. I mean, it depends on what the question is. So one of the, it may be a question like, is it possible that somebody could have been stabbed in this direction in this manner? Is it possible? Okay, yes or no? Yes, it's possible because blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's that was a question one time,
But one of the things that I love to say to people is that people lie. Science doesn't.
Right.
And a perfect example of that was the Michael Brown case, which
Oh, yes.
where the spent
Very
shell
well.
was found in the car, the blood was in the car. The cop told the truth. There was no hands up, don't shoot. So science showed that he and his friend, well, he didn't testify, but his friend, who was the main witness, who was involved in the robbery with him, was lying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing when you can have science say, no, that's not what happened. Oh, well, how do you know that? He said it happened. Well, because the evidence speaks louder than a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time. Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing when that happens,
Mm-hmm.
That,
Yep.
I want to ask you too, in my homicide career, which I did 16 years in the detective bureau out of my 27 years, I was in homicide for 10. I only came across one autoerotic asphyxia case in my entire career,
Yeah.
which I surmised they must be somewhat rare then.
Yeah, they are. They are pretty rare. I teach on that topic, and I've gotten a lot of officers around the country that have sent me some of their cases and has discussed some of their cases with me. And so I use some of those examples in our training. But they are rare, but they do happen.
Would you explain to our audience what that is? I don't know if everyone knows what that is.
So an autoerotic fatality is an accident. It's not suicide. It's an accident. And most people, if you would ask them, well, certainly in police work, but if you'd ask somebody what an autoerotic fatality was, they would say, well, it's somebody that was hanging themselves while they masturbated. And so, fine, that's true. And ligature strangulation is probably one of the most popular, but it basically, the actual definition is someone who is alone used some type of implement to enhance sexual pleasure, and that implement misfunctioned and caused their unintentional death. It can be electrical, it can be insertion, it can be strangulation. There's a lot of things it can be. And boy, do I have some stories, but it can be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be strangulation, but true enough, ligature strangulation is probably the most common because that in and of itself, hypoxia, is by itself a paraphilia, which can cause a euphoric effect and climax just by that.
And from what I understood, and I don't say this through experience since I only ran into one of those cases in my whole police career, but from the book Practical Homicide Investigation by
Yes.
Gebert,
Yep.
He says that it's as common in females as in males, which I would have never thought.
Yeah, so he does say that, but I don't know that if I disagree with Vernon on anything, it might be that, because he's like the god for us. Okay, so I don't dispute him at all. But all around the country, when I'm talking to officers, I'm just not seeing that many female cases. Now, obviously there are some, but I just don't see as many. But here's something he's getting at too, and understand this. The way females go about it a lot of times is differently than men, and so there's not as high a level of danger, and so they are they're not dying at the higher rate as men. So that's true, but there's still a lot not known about it, because some of these cases are being misinterpreted. There's like 15 scene features and whatever, but a lot of detectives around the country may see something and not actually rule it that way because they don't really understand what they're looking at. I mean, if the guy's dressed in high heels and boots and or shoes and doing things with pornography and stuff, that's obvious. But sometimes it's not so obvious.
Our case was like that. Like
Yeah,
I was dressed
obvious.
up. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, that's sort of dangerous, very, very dangerous behavior.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
for a small thrill to risk your life, to die, to be willing to die for it, right?
Yeah. But it's something. It's a paraphilia. It's something that they can't change. They're attracted to it. It's just like people are attracted to red high heel shoes, whatever. It's their kind of thing. And once it, hey, this is a statement that I use with a lot of sex offenders. And this applies here too. You can quit smoking. You can quit drinking. You can quit doing drugs. You can quit stealing. But one thing you can't do is quit having sex. Now, there comes a certain age in a man's life that it makes it a lot more difficult. But my point is, when you're young and you've got these paraphilias, and you've got these urges, I mean, it controls these people. And so that, number one, that helps them to get the confession point. But they're going to do it. If they enjoy it, they're going to do it.
So in essence, last week we had a social worker on from California who counsels sex offenders and people that are involved in sex trafficking and human trafficking.
Yeah.
And I always thought that basically they're untreatable sex offenders. That was always my thought, that you can try to help them, but they're going to still always do what they do if they're let out of prison.
Well, but did she tell you? Did she agree with you on that? Probably not.
She felt that she could help them.
So here's the thing. So yeah, I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist at all, but here's what I've learned through my career. Okay, so it's correct in one way that it's hard maybe to help them, but they have to want to have help. It's just like a heroin addict. And I say this in some of my classes. So I ask people, and I think we're going to stay G-rated here, but I ask people, okay, you're a heterosexual male. Yes. Tell me why. And you can't use physical attributes, like I like, boobs or whatever. Tell me why you're heterosexual. But I don't know. I can't explain that. I just am, right? Or if you're homosexual, why are you homosexual? Please explain to me.
Well, either way, you're attracted to women or you're attracted to men.
Yes.
Very simple.
Yes. So now, not rape different. Rape is a power thing. Rape is an anger thing. Rape is different. I molest children. Okay. This guy says, not me. This guy says I molest children. So if you ask him, and I've interviewed thousands of them in prison trying to understand them. And one thing they'll say is, I don't know why I'm attracted to this age group of children. I don't know why, but I just am, so they can. So what she's saying is, can she help them? She should be able to help them to control it. So I'm a healthy heterosexual male. I legitimately could have sex with every woman that would stand still long enough. I still have a moral responsibility and an ethical responsibility not to be acting out on that. Right. I'm married. I should. So people who are attracted to children have the same moral and ethical responsibility to control their urges, but they don't. So can they be controlled? I think so, with medication and counseling and things like that. Yes. Yeah. If they want to, but they have to want to.
If they go off their meds, that's like a train wreck, though.
Oh, sure. But so's a heroin addict, or so's, whatever. Yeah. They have to, an alcoholic will never get help until he decides I have a problem and I want help.
Right.
Right.
Mark, are you hiding all your ligatures for tonight?
No, I was thinking about what you said. And, the only difference is that even if you were, promiscuous as a man, a heterosexual man, and you were married and you shouldn't be cheating on your wife, you couldn't control it, but somehow you did. It's different because at least you can get married. You can get one spouse. If you're a pedophile, you can't imbibe at all. There's
right.
no time.
Not legally. Mm-hmm. Right. Not legally. You just have to learn to control it in other ways. Right.
I'm sure there's plenty of people that actually do control it. They are asexual.
Sure.
They're adults.
Sure.
know what they desire. Maybe they do something in private, look at pictures or whatever, but they don't act on it with another person.
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly right.
Maybe
And
that's why certain clergy members go into the Catholic priest, for example, go into that profession because they're afraid of their sexuality and they figure they can maybe hide behind the collar.
but they don't always help.
Well, a lot of it had to do with, especially, when we grew up, like in the 70s and the 80s, that a lot of those priests, the question would come up if you had a son, and he was like, back then it would have been 25. So how come when's your son getting married? Does he have a girlfriend? Those kind of questions would pop up.
Right.
And if you didn't have an answer for that, there was an opinion made about you. But if you went into the priesthood, that was great. That was that was an honor for your family.
My mother used to say that we were 8 kids in our family, Irish Catholic family. My mother used to actually get upset that not one of her 5 sons became a priest. I was like, Mom, what are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? As we got older, you wanted one of us to become a priest? Are you out of your mind?
Because to her, that was an honor.
Yeah, I guess, but it sure wasn't for me. I failed out of altar boy school. I couldn't figure out when to ring the bells. I was like, I think I just refused to learn.
Well, I grew up a Pentecostal boy, so I'm not Catholic. So that's the other side of the spectrum.
But they still have a number of pedophiles in that religion.
Everything, of course. And preachers that have affairs with their piano players. I mean, so it's pedophilia or any type of sex crime. It's in every industry. It's not it's just whether or not the person decides to control it. And like Mark said, he's right. The thing is, if you're a pedophile, you can't have a legit relationship, and so you have to hide it all the time. And so controlling it does make it harder because you have to do other things.
Yes.
Look at the movie Saturday Night Fever. John Travolta plays Tony Manero, the best dancer in Brooklyn. And you know what? He gets outshined by his brother, Father Frank Jr.
Yeah.
The mother loves Father Frank Jr. because he's a priest. And then Father Frank Jr. doesn't want to be a priest anymore.
My mother was the Irish version of that.
And then he goes, she goes,
I couldn't dance.
He's sitting at the dinner table with his mother. He goes, what are you going to do? And the mother says, I got to go to church so I can go pray to God to have Father Frank Jr. call me. And he said, wait a minute. You're going all the way to church to ask God to make Father Frank Jr. call you. Why don't you just call him?
Yeah, exactly.
God, you're operator for.
Yeah, true.
How long were you saving that comedy bit for, Mark?
No, that's one of my favorite movies, and that's one of my, that's a great. The whole movie is one great line after the other.
Yeah.
Make God our operator.
Darren, let me ask you something though, which is fascinating to me, and just for our listeners out there, Darren, besides being a medical legal investigator, you're retired lieutenant, or you're still active lieutenant?
Yeah, I'm not active anymore. I work part-time with the local PD and the sheriff's department doing some investigations, but I'm basically retired. Anyway,
Darren has a podcast called Coroner Talk.
Yep.
And which to me is fascinating. But I just picture all you coroners going to a restaurant one night or to a bar and all hanging out and talking about death. I think the bartender would quit after that night if he had to hear all these stories.
I don't know, because that happens all the time, and they don't seem to quit. They just seem to they hang around more sometimes.
They like the stories of them, right?
Yeah, and that is one thing about you guys are cops, old cops, old coroners. They'll talk about a case. Sometimes it's like, this is the weirdest freaking case I've ever had, and sometimes it's what do you guys think? Am I on the right track? Education peer to peer, and sometimes it's just trying to outdo each other. You think that one's good? Well, I had an XYZ, and we try not to share names or pictures, but we tell stories very graphically, and so yeah.
When you start out, who's the person that has to stick the thermometer up the DOA's ass? Is that like the?
It's the newest of the new.
That's right. Is that the rookie MLI?
Yep, that's the rookie. Come here, boy. I got something for you.
Yeah, this is your job today.
Yep.
Hey, Mark, I got to go downstairs. I left some of the equipment in the car. Would you mind taking the DOA's temperature?
They learn quickly how to do liver sticks.
Hey, how do you like your steaks?
How do I like my steaks?
Yeah, Rick?
Well, maybe a little pink in the middle, but I don't like them bloody.
Really? Okay. Because I
Oh
figured,
gosh, no. I've seen too much of that. I've seen too much raw meat. I don't need to eat it. I want them well.
Someone on our Zoom Live is asking us if we've had any paranormal experiences. I, for one, haven't. Mark,
I have not.
Mark,
I have not, and I keep reaching out to people and asking them because I want to do in October, 2 months in October. I want to do some ghost stories on our podcast, and I can't find any medical legal death investigator or coroner or listen to our podcast or anybody else that can give me a real legit paranormal experience story. I've been around dead people at all hours of the day and night by myself with people in funeral homes, in morgues. I have never had one do or say anything. I've never seen or heard a ghost or felt a ghost. Nothing. So. And I've been at this 30 years, so.
I haven't, but we can refer you to our friend Steve DeShavi, who is a Manhattan North homicide detective. He's on a show called The Dead Files. He'd love to have you as a fan.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great. I do have a funny story for you, though.
Go ahead.
And years ago, kind of along this lines, years ago, we had a gentleman that had died in the house, and I had a fairly newer female officer there, and then another senior patrol officer. And so I'm doing my thing. I was a lieutenant detective, but I was also at the coroner's office. So I was doing my thing in the house, and I said, okay, I need to run out and get some stuff out of my vehicle. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. So what the thing is, I had rolled this guy over and then kind of let him back down, and I needed to go get some stuff. Well, when I'd rolled him over, he'd been dead for, a couple days. And whenever I rolled him, I guess I kind of broke the, kind of like a mucus area or somehow the kind of gotten plugged up there. Just depends on how you die. Well, as he was laid back over, I was outside and getting stuff out of my trunk, and I see this female officer come running out of the house, run across the yard, get in her car and leave. And I'm thinking, oh, they must be like a fight or a shooting or something. She's headed off, I get back in the house, and the senior officer is there just holding his gut, just laughing as hard as he can. I said, what the crap's happened? Well, because I had moved him and then kind of let him back down, and those gases were built up, I guess I kind of broke that area, that plug, I guess. I mean, not really a plug, but however it was in there. And he started exhaling. Well, generally it just air comes out and you don't hear anything because you just start smelling stuff. Well, in this case, it started going across his vocal cords, and he was going, and she was in the room by herself. The senior officer's in the other room making a phone call, and she heard him going, and she ran.
That's
ran. Why didn't you help him?
That's why, like, a DOA is always like punishment for a new cop. Well, it's really not. It's just paying your dues. Sometimes bosses use that as punishment when someone screws up. All right, you're going to get every DOA for the next month. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And if our fans don't know, the police have to guard a DOA till it's picked up either by the funeral home or the medical examiner. So
even if it's by yourself and at nighttime in the dark yard outside.
And it's never a nice apartment. There's always roaches jumping all over you. It's always horrible. And you're hanging out to guard the corpse till the MEO.
I had to guard a corpse one night for several hours until we caught another guy out of he had barricaded himself in. Anyway, I was out there sitting in the backyard, kind of with the corpse, but also watching the back door. And the dead guy was handcuffed beside me because the officer had shot him. Been years ago. And I'm hearing stuff rattling around. Now, understand, this is back when I was working in the country. And there was 3 armadillos running around scratching the grass. And I'm out there in the dark with 3 armadillos and a dead guy.
Oh, man.
Wow, that's scary.
True fact. Can't make that up.
The first DOA that I had, I remember I came off a foot post. I was a rookie, and when I got there, and the sector was basically handing me the paperwork as soon as I walked through the door, and they said, "Keep an eye on that guy, make sure he doesn't take off." And then I was in this guy's house by myself, and he's an old man. He died on his recliner watching the Mets.
Oh.
I totally get it.
That'll kill anyone watching.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, it's scary, and it's scary for me anyway. It was really scary for like 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes later, I was just like, you know what? Let's see what this guy's got in the fridge.
Yeah,
and I went,
hurt you.
And there was some chocolate cake there. There was milk.
Don't tell me you ate
I cut a piece of cake.
You ate the cake?
Yeah, and I just sat next to him and I ate my cake and I watched the Mets run that night too until the family came. But yeah, so you can
Yeah, then they're not going to hurt you, and they're great conversationalists because they will not interrupt you. And here's something I learned from being police work and coroner work at the same time for so many years. Most of them smell identical, but the dead ones don't fight nearly as bad.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Darren, how about you want to talk about SIDS, infant death, that type of thing, responding to those kind of cases?
Yep. So, one thing is SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. That's something that's going way down because we don't, now over the years when they started requiring more investigation, Bill, back when you started, there was a lot of SIDS cases, right?
Yeah.
Infants of a certain age, they just called it SIDS and moved on. Well, they realized that's probably not the case. And so now that there's more mandatory investigation and autopsies and medical inquiries, now SIDS cases are actually way, way down because we've actually finding reasons why kids die.
Well, what is the reason most of the time?
Most of the time, well, first off, most infants under 3 years and under, and certainly down in the infants, is accident and natural. Majority die accident and natural. Okay. Other than homicide, they're shaking babies or something like that. But some of the accident is sleeping with mom and dad, sleeping with a sibling, you've got that somebody, a rollover or co-breathing. Sometimes, hopefully they're learning more now, but don't be putting big pillows and blankets and stuffed animals in your baby's crib. And when I was raising my children, it was always laying them on their stomach. Now we want to lay them on their back.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle, it was lay them on their side. But for the most part, if it's an accident, it's going to be because of sleeping conditions or something like that. Majority of the time.
I did have a bunch of cases where the mother rolled over and suffocated the baby.
Yeah.
And in one case, they actually charged her.
Yeah.
Because she was a frequent flyer. It was a second time.
Well, and sometimes, if they're drunk or high or something like that, they should know better.
Right.
But some things just happen. And I talked to parent groups over the years about this very thing. Sometimes, not all the time, but I have over the years, a time or two. Health department brought me in or something like that. And I would say, okay, if you think you can sleep with your baby, they can die just from rebreathe. I mean, just from breathing their own air. Okay, they can die very quickly. I said, so here's what you do. You get you a 9-inch cake pan. You make you a cake. You put a lot of frosting and icing on it. You put it in your bed. If you can sleep 5 nights without getting icing all over you, your pillow, your blankets, then sleep with your baby. But anywhere you have frosting in the morning is where your baby's head was.
But you can understand why a mother who's exhausted, that maybe is breastfeeding, will want to keep the child in bed with her because she's just too exhausted.
Sure. But now they make those side cribs that slide between the mattress and the box spring. So the baby's right beside you, but they're off the bed a little bit. Right. You're still there, but you can't roll over on them, and they have their own area.
I was guilty of it, man. I slept with my child, both the kids, at some point, and one at a time in the middle, between and sometimes I remember the first time my son actually fell off the bed in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And that's pretty scary because you wake up and the baby's screaming, you're like, where is it? And then it's on the floor. So you just kind of, you're feeling around, making sure nothing's broken. And by the second kid, man, you just reach out in the middle in your sleep, you just grab it, throw it back in the bed. You don't check it for nothing. Shut up.
I remember I was sleeping in the dorms at 3280 Broadway and a drunk detective fell out of the top bunk. And we were like, we just put him back up there. We thought he was going to be really hurt because, when you hear someone fall, that's a good 4.5 feet high, 5 feet high. He just hit, but, drunk people don't get hurt.
Right.
Yeah, they say if you're drunk and you're, with no seatbelt on, you're rolling around in there, you're all loosey-goosey, you're probably going to be fine.
A lot of times that's true. Yeah.
And he was from Manhattan Special Victims, so, he just he weathered the storm. He just hit the floor.
Yeah.
Darren, how about give us one of your greatest cases, or something that's forensically very interesting to our audience, that was solved through forensic science.
Right. Well, let's see. I mean, there's a lot of them, but then you try to think of them right off the bat. So one that comes to mind is a shooting. Mom shot her 2 adult children, set the house on fire, and then ultimately shot herself. But one of the children died. They were in their 20s. The other child lived. But at the time, then the neighbors called 911. So now we had a whodunit. We have a dead boy, a dead mom, and one living child who says, I was just asleep and I don't know what happened. I just woke up in pain, and he's on the front porch with a pillow. So we have to determine who shot who, right? And so, one of the things that really helped us, he had gunshot residue on his hands, and so that seemed like, well, maybe he was a shooter. But we all know when you're sleeping like this on your side, you're going to have gunshot residue on your hand, So, one of the things that we did to prove whether or not she shot herself, and we believed that she'd shut the house on fire, which it just smoldered in the basement and went out. But she come around the house, saw him, like he says, and she thought the gig was up, so she shot herself. We had to prove, is it possible that he shot her? And so we took the vehicle and forensically was able to light the inside of the vehicle up and see all that microscopic blood spatter to show that, first off, the bullet went all the way through her into the back seat. So no shooter was behind her doing reach around like this. It could have been in the back passenger seat. Well, there's no way anybody could be in the back passenger seat and reach up and shoot her in the chest. So then we had the front. So the front window and the side doors and all that all had microscopic blood spatter on it, which we proved then that no one else could have been in that vehicle. Now, we towed the vehicle to our impound area and, used UV lighting and stuff like that. But and then eventually the gunshot residue on his hands didn't really matter. And the rest of it was a lot of investigation about what she's been doing and what she was planning. But again, had it not been for the ability to see all that microscopic backspatter, we probably wouldn't have solved it.
And usually there's 3 types of blood spatter: low, medium, and high velocity. Right?
High velocity, yeah.
And high velocity is caused by something moving at a high rate of speed, much like a projectile, right?
Yep. And it'll come back too.
And it causes smaller droplets of blood,
yep.
Right?
Yep. Exactly. Right. And there's some of these cases where here's a good one. Lady had a lot of health problems. She was in her late 50s, early 60s. I can't remember now, but a very obese lady, had a lot of health problems. Her husband was a bit younger than her. He was active and doing things. And I think that she was becoming a burden on him because he was finishing up some college and he was getting a medical or an RN degree and all this. And I think she was a burden on him because I've got a new life and, my fat wife is in there, medical problems, can't go do anything. Yeah. Well, she died. So he got home one night and started cooking dinner and all this for her. And then he called 911. My wife's not breathing, blah, blah. So as we get to the scene and we're looking around, that's all. Okay. Everything looks fine. She's got a list of medical problems, lots of medication. So it's and some heart conditions. And so it's like, it'd been a really easy thing to rule this as just a myocardial or something like that. And so, but it just didn't really set right. So we got all the information from him. We did collect a little bit of evidence, and then we did some toxicology and found out that she had died of a morphine overdose. She was not prescribed morphine. And at the end, because we were able to find that in her blood and some of the evidence that we took from the house, we were able to prove that he took morphine from the ER when he's on rotations, put it into a cherry slushy from Sonic, and she drank her slushy before supper, and within an hour or so she died.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just you guys went the extra step further because the situation seemed like
something just didn't seem right.
It didn't make sense. Instinct always comes in, and your instinct is always correct, right?
Generally, I tell officers and the coroners when I'm teaching, if you've been at this more than a minute, trust your gut, because even if you're wrong, then you've taught your gut, right? It's not that you're right or it's not that it was bad, but trust your gut, because human beings have a way of looking at situations and thinking, boy, this just don't seem right, So explore that, and a lot of times you're correct. It's not right.
Well, they always tell that if something doesn't seem right, it's not, right? Or
Yeah.
If it's too good to be true, it is,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
How many times you hear that?
Yeah.
Darren, why don't you tell us a little bit about your university, the Death Investigation Academy?
Yeah. So, Death Investigation Training Academy legit started in 2015. And kind of the backstory on that is I've been teaching academy students and stuff for 30 years, just as a young cop, and moved on and up. And a few years ago, I started Coroner Talk in 2014, the podcast, because I realized that specific death investigation training wasn't very common back then. And so I thought, well, if I could give somebody an hour a week, that's something. And so as it went on, I started doing some lecturing and speaking around the country because I think the podcast opened doors. And then I realized, wow, there's a lot of police training, right? A lot of homicide thing, but the normal coroner can't necessarily go to a homicide school for police. They won't let them in because they're not commissioned police officer.
Right.
And so I started doing some online courses and some in-person training. And now, fast forward to 2020, we have the Medicolegal Death Investigation Online Academy. It's a full academy, and then there's a certification exam at the end. We're able to certify you. We have our own testing board, and we provide the basic for many, many states, coroners, and we just provide this continuing education for gobs of states. And even if we're not partnered with them, most all states, no one's ever turned our training down, and we're becoming one of the largest trainers for medical legal death investigators, both police and for coroner medical examiners.
When you say large, what do you mean? How many?
I mean, we've
go
done
through your school
hundreds a
year?
year. Yeah, I think this year we've trained just under 200 in medical legal, the certification. When it comes to we got 26 individual courses. I mean, I think like 4,000 this year in just individual courses. So that might be, Bill took a course on motor vehicle accident injury, or maybe another officer took some courses on gunshot or stabbing and whatever. But every year we teach around 200 we certify around 200 investigators.
Mark and I want to go to the blood spatter where you beat the side of beef with the bat.
So funny story. Well, we do occasionally. I have instructors to teach at. We were preparing for a medical legal class, and we had a blood spatter component. So I was making up some blood spatter sample cards, poster boards. And so I'm at our academy where I'm at now. I'm outside, and between the buildings, there's a grassy area. So I'm out there with my fake blood, and I've got these big poster boards set up on the ground. And so I'm taking a machete and I'm sticking it in my fake blood. And so I'm walking and I'm doing some 90-degree drips. I'm slopping it down and throwing it, trying to make different designs for different activity. Well, as I'm doing all this, I'm slinging his blood around and dipping it in. And an old lady that was going down the road to get her haircut seen me slinging blood everywhere and stopped, and her eyes were huge. And so, yeah, now I realized I probably need to hide that before I do it again.
Well, you know what? It's interesting when you know the science behind it. You go into a crime scene and you look at the ceiling and you say, "Oh, those are cast-off stains." Yes. Like you know what to look for,
Yeah.
And you see,
and you can count how many times a person was hit based upon the lines of the cast-off.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you know what you're looking for. I wasn't great. Right. I was never great at reading the crime scene, but when people would explain it to me, I was like, "Oh shit, that makes sense."
And sometimes blood spatter isn't that hard. For instance, all of my blood spatter is 2 foot down, okay, from 2 foot high down. All right, so that means whatever took place down here. If I've got witnesses telling me that they were both standing up, waylaying each other, I'm like, wow. I mean, I'm not a blood spatter expert, but I can tell you that's a lie because all of it took place down here. So somebody was already on the ground before they started being beat, right? Yeah. So even though then you've got a lot of science that goes into directions and all that, but some of it's just as easy as to saying, yeah, that didn't happen. Just like that microscopic high velocities, just knowing that tells you a lot,
Right.
Yeah.
The speed that caused like blunt trauma, the blood spatter, the spot should be much thicker than something traveling at a high rate of speed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, and then they're gonna be pointed toward the ground, right? Because the blood hits and then drips down, right?
Right. And then you have, depending on how the blood hits and what surface, you have angles, 90 degree, 80, 60, 75, and you can kind of determine what angle they hit. And that can tell a story, that can tell a story of where people were at or what took place during, and how many times somebody was hit. I mean, if you got blood spatter going this way at 60 degrees, you got another strike going this way at 80 degrees or whatever, you could tell how many times somebody was struck, even on the wall and things like that.
Wow.
Or smear marks, smear marks or white marks, a smear pattern or a white pattern.
My favorite is arterial spurting.
Oh, that's pretty nice. Yeah.
That's my favorite.
That leaves some great artistic designs on the wall.
It does that again. You see it spurt up on the high up the wall.
Yep.
How macabre is this conversation, right? We could be part of Coroner Talk. We should go to your next restaurant or bar at night. And
You
go out.
absolutely should.
We can tell stories too,
Yeah.
Is that what you record at a bar?
No. We just brought that up because sometimes we just talk as coroners. But no, every week on the podcast, we talk about a different topic. All month or all year, we've had a different theme every month. So one month was child death investigation. One was blunt force trauma. So every month of 2020 has been a theme. Some years we just have different guests on, and we still do have different guests on, but the main goal of Coroner Talk is to every week provide some kind of training in some type of death investigation, whether it be investigating gunshot or interviewing witnesses or something. And sometimes it's just, it isn't real technical. It's just basic how to go about doing something. And then sometimes I get on a rant about something and it becomes my rant. But I tell people I own the microphone. You can tune out anytime you want.
Yeah, that's good. One thing, Darren, I noticed too. I go on LinkedIn a lot, and there's a lot of stuff on there as far as people talking about science and law enforcement. Yeah. And there's a tremendous pushback against some of the technologies. For example, facial recognition. They're claiming that's biased against people of color.
But they're claiming, okay. I don't want to ruin your show, and I don't want YouTube to block you, but people are claiming everything is biased against people of color.
Right. But there's real organizations that are trying to look. They won't let them use it in LA. They won't let them use facial recognition.
Well, Facebook is one of the biggest facial recognition software companies in the world.
Right. No, but I'm saying to use the technology to make an identification.
Yeah, which is silly, because for years we used to, think odontology. Well, first off, odontology is our teeth impressions have now that we know that's not good science anymore. But facial recognition, I'm not going to say it's DNA. That's not true, but it's not that accurate. But it's really accurate. I mean, the casinos have used it for years. Facebook, you can have a picture of a family picture with you and a bunch of people in your family, and Facebook's going to automatically start tagging all of them because they recognize their faces. That's pretty accurate.
Pretty damn good. Well,
I mean,
the Zarnaev brothers from the Boston Marathon, that's how they were ID'd on
yes.
Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, just like your iPhone. I know that they ain't foolproof, but your iPhone did facial recognition to unlock your phone, and if you have one of your COVID-19 masks on, it won't unlock it.
Yeah.
How come the tooth thing isn't as good as it used to be?
Well, because the teeth impressions, what they found out over the years here recently is it's a little bit subjective. So if you have like a tooth missing, okay, you can see the tooth is missing, or you got certain directions or diagonals of teeth, okay, that's fine. But they're realizing they found some false convictions based on this, because some of it is subjectiveness. It isn't like I can prove that this person bit this. It's like it appears to be. It looks like it. And if we put this overlay of this clear, this design over his teeth and all this, it matches. But over the years here recently, we found out that a lot of those cases have been incorrect. Because it's based upon the opinion of the odontologist. And so if they're looking at it wrong or seeing it wrong, then it's not as accurate. So now they're not using it. Now, for conviction, I still believe it's a great investigative tool. If I've got 5 suspects and I've got a good bite mark on a body, I'm going to want to know out of those 5 suspects, which ones most closely match. And that's the guy I'm going to concentrate on for now. So that's good science there, but I can't just convict him on that. And, back in the 80s, 90s, they were convicting people on it. Now they've realized, well, that's not quite as accurate.
It's not foolproof, in other
Not
words.
foolproof. Like polygraph. I believe in polygraph. I'm a CVSA operator, computerized voice stress analysis. I do that for a lot of people. I believe in it, but I also know that there's some holes in it. So I
Right.
use it as an investigative tool, but I'd never want to send somebody to prison just on that.
Well, that prison guard upstate was murdered by a lifer, and he was convicted based on a dental impression, among
Yeah.
other things.
Yeah,
You know.
and among
Oh,
other things,
Ted
it's
Bundy.
fine, but
What's that?
Ted Bundy.
yeah.
Ted
Yeah,
Bundy.
but it's true, but there was other stuff about him
There
other
was
than
other
bite
stuff,
marks.
but that was the first thing.
Yes, that was
Like
the
you
first
said,
thing.
investigative tool.
Yeah.
You know, that was the first thing that, all right, we might actually have the right guy here.
Yeah.
You know, I've been out of the game for almost 9 years. I retired, and I remember when we would put a DNA case in, it could take 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah.
How fast is DNA coming back now?
Well, 6 months.
No, but there's a machine that can ID it in 90 minutes. How could
Yeah.
that be?
Yeah, that's because, my number is 10,365. Next, that's how it is. It just takes a long time to get to my number because there's so many DNA cases going in. And true enough, there are some private labs that are quicker, but when you're dealing with state and government, they're using state labs or contracted labs. Well, they're behind because everybody sends it to them. Now, if we have a very fast case or we really need to do something and it's a high profile murder case, the county fits the bill and they say, okay, send it to the private lab. They're still qualified lab, but they're a private lab, which means they have 100 cases they're working out at a time, not 10,000 cases. And so I can get it back within a few days if I put a rush on it.
If there was no line and it was just a test, how long would it take to get a DNA case back?
So, again, like you said, probably within 90 minutes to 2 hours to get everything done.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know, and it depends on if it's a touch DNA, if they've got a lot of blood, if it separates easy, if they're trying to get DNA, a little bit of DNA off of a shirt. I mean, it can take a little longer just to spin it down and all that. So, I'm careful not to wade into that too far because that's kind of above my pay grade. I just collect it and send it to people who know what they're doing.
Right. And isn't the PCR is the test they do now because they can take a small amount of DNA and make it larger, right?
Yeah, and they can grow it, kind of grow it.
Polymerase chain reaction.
Yeah, they can take a little and make it into something they can see bigger,
I think
that's why touch DNA works.
They got better at that, I think, from 9/11 because they did so many.
Yeah, because they had to do so many. And with DNA, of course, one thing we have to talk about is this genealogy DNA solving these crimes.
Amazing. That's amazing.
Oh, my lands. And no one ever thought about it. No one ever thought about it until, I forget her name now. She died. The author and that died that was looking into that case. And then there was a doctor and a police officer kind of cahoots together. And this DNA doctor, the genealogy doctor said, you know what? Let me try this. This might work. We've never done it. I don't know if it'll work or not, but I can tell you if people are related or not. So let me try. And he started looking through databases and we all know the story. And once it happened, just like the 4-minute mile, 4-minute mile could never be done until one guy did it. Now it happens all the time.
Right.
But
there's legalities to doing out and out familial DNA, right? I don't think they'll allow you to do that.
What do you mean?
Well, say for example, you think a brother of this perpetrator you're looking at, you get his DNA, say surreptitiously.
Well,
and you run his
I don't know,
DNA and it comes awfully close to the perp, and you're like, it's got to be him.
So I don't know. I don't know case law on that, but even if we don't get a search warrant, you've been around long enough. Trash, things you dispose of. If I think John Doe did the killing, and I know his brother over here, Jerry, and I can, Jerry threw away a soda cup or something. I collect that straw if I want to pay to have it tested and find out. I don't know the legalities of that. I'm not really. There's whether or not then we're going to keep Jerry's DNA in a database without his knowledge. So we probably have to make sure that's probably where the question comes in, because he hasn't been convicted of a felony and he hasn't maybe submitted his DNA to a genealogy. So are we going to leave that in a database? That's probably where the court question comes up.
Yeah, because those databases, they're interesting because you got the nationwide one.
Yeah.
And then you have the local one.
Yep.
And there's protocol to it. So how long does it take? Like, for example, you got me, you got my DNA, and you throw it in there. How long does that take for it to go through everyone nationwide and see if there's a match in the nationwide database? I qualify for it.
So I don't know. I guess that's a question I don't know. If I already have your profile and I simply enter your profile into the database and have it match, I don't know. I know that it isn't really very long because, again, you're dealing with a computer that can analyze thousands a second, but I wouldn't want to tell you an answer to that. I don't know.
I think it's easier if you have an exemplar to compare the exemplar against the DNA that you have from a perpetrator. I think that is much easier to do than to compare it against.
Well, I know they do comparisons.
If we got a guy for a rape, like a pattern rape here in Manhattan, and we want to figure out maybe this guy, because he's a transient. Let's see if they're looking for this guy all over the country. Yep. So now we throw his DNA in there. I was just curious, how long does it take for it to go nationwide before?
I don't know. I guess I don't know that answer for sure. And I know, just like with NamUs and some of these other databases, you put missing people in there. And if I was to find a body or something at some point, and we also put that DNA in NamUs, so they'll find a match. I mean, it's always checking constantly to say exactly how long that takes. I don't know, but the actual searching of it probably doesn't take that long because it's computer databases. But like you said, there's a lot of databases, and some databases aren't shared. So.
But all these databases and all of these DNA testing equipment has to get the stamp of approval by the FBI, or else they're worthless.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
because
they get
some of these genealogy DNA comparisons. Now when you submit your DNA to these genealogy things, you have to, check mark and submit. Yes, I know. Yes, I want my DNA left public, or no, I don't. So if you say no, you don't, then it's not compared in these genealogy searches.
However, a serial killer. Please do not leave.
Exactly. Yeah. So these but like you said, a stamp of approval. But sometimes when we're looking at these genealogy databases, and we're just looking for cousins, we're looking for matches. We're just like with the Golden State Killer, they had they wore out a lot of shoes, knocking on a lot of doors, trying to narrow it down. He wasn't their first suspect, by the way. It was a cousin of his that was. And so then, did he live in this area? Could this person is he of the right age? And so they start narrowing all this down. So the DNA match is just going to say, here's some people that are closely related to him. And they're from New York, they're from Connecticut, they're from Missouri, they're from whatever. And then it takes the detective work to track them down and find out where they were. Well, to narrow it down even more.
A perfect example of that, I think, in special victims, when they get a hit on someone who's in prison, I think they call it a cold hit. Okay. And some of them could be 15 or 20 years old, and then they go to the prison, and they got to slam the door on this guy's alibi. Simply, have you ever been in 3280 Broadway? No, I never been in that building. Do you know this woman? You don't know her. You never seen her before. And then they slam the door and all those questions, and they say, okay, how did your DNA get inside this lady if you never met her before and you've never been in that building? Then they say hello. Now you go on the way to, Right. Now, are there still a lot of DNA cases sitting on shelves and warehouses that haven't been tested?
Well, I'm sure there is, but there's a big national push for that to change. And in fact,
there's been a national push 20 years ago. If there's still
but I know locally, for instance, for us locally, the Attorney General's office, they're getting money funded, and they've hired people and they're checking. And one of the things they've asked us, do we have any cases not tested? Yes, there's cases not tested. And you say, well, why didn't we test their cases? Well, sometimes these cases aren't tested because you have somebody, first off, some of them are very many years old, but even the ones that are only a couple years old, I come in, I'm a young girl, and I claim that my boyfriend pushed me or forced me or did this or did that or whatever. And then, but you go to the hospital to get a rape kit done, to get all that. And then by the time it's all said and done over a couple of days, like, well, maybe, not really. I was just mad at him. Well, now we've got this kit though, but we can't throw it away. So then they say, well, was this tested? No, it's not tested because she backed off her story. Right. whatever the case may be. There's several, examples like that. Well, they
You
want
know
all
what-
those
you know what they
tested.
do in Manhattan with a case like that? They lock her up.
Oh yeah, a lot of times they do
File
now
a false
charge them.
report. They want
Mhm.
to discourage those false reports,
Right.
Guess
right.
what? You're getting arrested because you just made a false report.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Well-
there's sometimes those are the reasons why some of these cases aren't tested, or you don't have a suspect. Now, nowadays we would never do that. But 15 years ago or so, someone says they were raped, they don't know who did it. And so you go to the hospital, they get a rape kit, but they don't send it in because they don't have a suspect. So the 15, 20 years ago, the thinking was, well, we'll hold it. And then if we get a suspect, we'll
Right.
send it in a match. Well, all of a sudden, 20 years later, these things aren't tested. Well, now that there's a big push to get them tested, now they're linking cases together. Oh my God, this guy's raped 20 women.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, it leads us to this point of the show, probably the most important question of the night. Since you're a coroner, I have to ask you this. What is your favorite episode of Quincy?
Well, I have watched Quincy when I was younger, but I guess I couldn't tell you an episode though.
I thought it was a
Guess I
great
don't
show.
know.
No, because you mentioned about, he did it all. He not only was
He did it all.
He was the coroner, but then, he was in foot pursuits and
Yeah.
he was, throwing cuffs on people. And you mentioned, doing the coroner's report and then going out and doing some investigation on top of it. That's basically what he did.
Yeah,
You know,
right,
so-
right. And to your point, some places are still not quite like Quincy. And Quincy was the CSI Effect back then, as we have today. That was their,
Yeah.
But to your point, sometimes like New York is a little bit different, probably because they're so busy. But there's a lot of places where an MDI may work for a medical examiner's office, go to a scene, work with the police, deal with the body, but then the MDI may have to go and talk to family about, medical history and things like that, or suicidal ideations. They go get medical records. Maybe when they're there, they find out something else, or they go talk to somebody or whatever. And most of the time they're not placing cuffs on too many people. But there's a lot of places in the country though, where the coroner is also a commissioned deputy sheriff or police officer in that area. So maybe they are doing dual roles sometimes.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And how about that show where he used to kill serial killers, but wasn't he a coroner first too?
I don't know. You're talking about Dexter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he was a coroner or not, but Dexter's kind of a hero of mine.
Yeah. You see?
Not really, but yeah.
Well, we reached the hour, man. And Bill, we got an announcement. We got a new Patreon customer. They're trickling in one at a time, but we're happy to have them. So we want to give you a shout out. Bill?
I forgot his name.
Oh,
You have it written down?
well, we got our Patreon right here. But in the meantime, we have Patreon.
Darren, do you do Patreon?
No, I used to years ago, but I haven't done it in years now. I mean, again, now the podcast is kind of absorbed by the Academy, and so the Academy takes care of all the expenses associated with the podcast. So
That's great. That's great. We're trying to become big stars in the podcasting. We're trying to become podcasting moguls.
well, and after so many years of podcasting myself, I'm still on a mogul. But I'll tell you this: consistency is the key.
You hell
You know, I've missed a week here or there. I mean, something happens, vacations, I might get sick or whatever. I've missed that. But consistency is the key. If you're going to be a weekly show, try your darndest to be a weekly show, because then it starts to build, and you'll not see your show will grow. But then if you start, maybe have merchandise, maybe you start doing more stuff, maybe you actually become big. It's going to take legit. Don't look back in disgust until you're like 2.5 years in, because it takes that long. The wheels turn slow.
Yeah, we're a year and a half in. We have over 100 shows already, though.
Yeah, no, you're doing good. So
Ryan
you got another
Dwyer.
year and you'll see more traction. Do what?
Yeah.
Ryan Dwyer, William Ryan, Carlos Rains. Those are our new Patreon customers. Want to give you a shout out, give you a big thank you. They all did the dipped in butter. Darren, you're not aware of this, but we have 3 different tiers. One of them is the $7. That's the bucket. If you can join it, you get behind the wall. Then it's $9 to polish Bill's rack. And for $11, you're dipped in butter. Your balls are dipped in butter.
Your balls are dipped in butter. Yeah.
So do we have to pay for our own airfare to get there, or how's that work out? Yeah.
Darren, you're a fascinating guest, and we definitely down the road love to have you back if you'd like.
I'd love to.
Back on,
Yeah.
And, there's so many topics we could cover in the forensic world and in the world of medical legal investigators, in the world of homicide, in the world of sex crimes. I mean,
yeah. And I don't know who your demographics are for sure on your show. But we could keep it at least PG, not R. But I could even do a case one day and show some screen share and show some pictures. Now we would keep it. We would keep it a bit PG so we don't cross too many boundaries and whatever. But I mean, if that's something the audience would be interested in, we can hide. It's not about the identity of the person, but wounds and how things work and things like that. They might find that interesting.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Most of our
Bill
are cops,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So Bill has a true crime episodes that he does on the Patreon, and I worked as an instructor for the Detective Bureau, and I used to coordinate our homicide course here in New York. Nice. And it was 2 weeks of what you're talking about. Do
you all know Joe Jackalone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Friend of mine.
He was my boss.
Friend of mine, meaning more of a virtual friend, but we have each other's cell phone numbers. So we can, I think in today's world, in this internet world, I can call you a friend, but if I got your cell phone number and I can call and you pick up, maybe that's a better friend. But Joe was really instrumental in helping us get a magazine off the ground that we've since stopped producing. I'm in his book. I've got some pictures and some things in his last book. And so I've put a lot of students between, because he teaches at
John Jay.
Academy. Yeah. And so, but anyway, I love Joe. He's been on my show a couple of times. He's fantastic. And as a boss, he probably was a strict boss, but I bet he was pretty fun.
No, he wasn't. No, he was good. He was good. He just and he was one of these bosses. He'd probably do everything himself if he could.
Yeah.
He's just get out of his way. I'll do it.
I've come over the years to really enjoy him. He's a great guy.
Here's a funny story. I got to the training unit. I was in the detective squad for 5 years, and I wanted to get out of there in the worst way, man. It was just too much work for me. And I was a comedian at the time, and I wanted to be out at night, telling my jokes. So I got a job. I got the training unit, and Joe was my boss there. And upon arrival, he said to me, you got to create an hour lecture to do for training. So I was like, all right, what should I do it on? And then he goes, well, what did you do in the squad? I said, I was on MySpace a lot. And he goes, all right, do it on there. I was like, what? He goes, do it on how to catch bad guys in MySpace. So that's what I did. I created this how to catch bad guys off of social media. And it was the first of its course in the NYPD. And then I had to do it for the chief of detectives, and it became part of the homicide course. And I used to go and I used to tour with it through different, set it up for different detective squads, introduce them to Twitter, Facebook, because a lot of these guys were old timers.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, Joe was my boss, and he was a great guy. And I had a show. I had him on my show. At the same time, I had Bill on my show. I used to have a show years before, and Joe was on there. Yeah. Great guy.
Oh yeah, he really is a great guy for sure.
So, any parting words, Bill?
No, Darren, this has been fascinating. And as I said, I'd love to have you either back on our Police Off the Cuff After Hours, or we could do a real crime show. That would be
either way, I'm up for it.
Cool.
I podcast gobs on my own, so I love being on these shows. So just let me know. I can come on anytime.
That'd be great.
All right, guys.
That's it. You
got anything?
Darren, you were a great guest.
Thank you.
You got anything to plug?
Just the training. I mean, if first off, Coroner Talk Podcast, you can find that like you'd find your podcast anywhere, Coroner Talk. But then, the Death Investigation Training Academy, we're number one on Google. Just type in Death Investigation Academy, we'll come up. And if you're a police officer out there or want to take some online training, we've got like 24, 25 online courses. They're all, most of the states are post-certified. Some they'll accept, and some are specific. It all explains all that. So, I mean, a lot of training on there. I mean, if you want to learn some child death, if you want to learn autoerotic, if you want to learn gunshot, we got all kinds of courses on there, and online it means you can stay at your home and do it. So, yeah,
That's great.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Darren.
Yep.
You were,
all right. Thank
you're
you.
a great guest. We'd love to have you back. On behalf of Police Off the Cuff, I wanted to say thank you for tuning in once again, and we'll be back Monday with a brand new show.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
See you.
Bye, Darren.